Greetings, Orlando. My name is Alondra de la Parra, and I'm delighted to be one of the finalists of the Orlando Philharmonic Music Director Search. I'm also really thrilled to be opening the season, the 14-15 season, with an amazing program featuring works by Márquez, Mozart, and Mahler. Our opening program for this season with the Orlando Philharmonic is extremely exciting. We're featuring Mozart's Parra Symphony, then Danzón No. 2 by Arturo Márquez from Mexico, just as I am from Mexico, and also Gustav Mahler's First Symphony, Titan. These three works are probably three of my absolute favorite works. The Mozart Symphony, the Parra Symphony, captures this 22-year-old Mozart. To our eyes may seem extremely young and immature, but actually for Mozart and his genius, he was already mature. And it's amazing how he portrays his life in Paris and also how he's adequating himself to try to find a job in Paris. So there's a little parallel there between Mozart, the young Mozart, and the young Mahler. The young Mahler that writes his first symphony, trying to discover his own language. And in the mix, we throw in Arturo Márquez Danzón, a really fun, exciting piece that will be a completely contrasting work. And that's what I like about this program. I tend to like programs that have this contrast, this fight between pieces. I love to see each member of the audience leave the hall thinking, I really love this piece, and I really didn't like this other one. Then my mission is accomplished. When you have a lot of the same, it tends to be boring, to me at least. So I like this contrasting, fighting type of programs. However, I see a line kind of mending these three pieces together. And that is youth, discovery, dreaming, and I'm absolutely ecstatic about it. Arturo Márquez, from my country, from Mexico, grew up in Álamo, Sonora, being exposed to so many different types of music. His father was a member of a mariachi band. He would hear jazz, he would hear norteñas, he would hear classical music. He was also trained in music school in bands. So he had all these sorts of influences in his music. And later in his life, he started to get interested in danzón, this type of dance that was originated in Cuba, but then adopted by Mexicans through the Gulf of Mexico and Veracruz. The danzón is a really interesting dance because back in the day in Cuba, the aristocratic ladies wanted a dance that they could dance and not sweat and not ruin their beautiful dresses. They would probably wear this pistachio and, light rose gowns, and they wouldn't want, with the sweat, with the heat, with the humidity of Cuba, to ruin their dresses while they were dancing. So the dance starts really slowly. And you hear this clave, this, and it's always there throughout the whole music, the whole piece. And this little dance, this seductive, subtle dance, starts a conversation between the clarinet and the oboe. But suddenly, you see that this dance starts to become a complete fiesta, a complete riot, where the ladies are no longer so afraid of their dresses and are more concerned with dancing with the guys that they like. And this part is the second part of the danzón. Danzón always has two parts. And the second part is called the montuno section, which is very similar to the mambo, like a distant cousin of the mambo. And in this mambo, montuno, the people just dance away, and you still hear the clave, but a lot faster. I think Márquez has done a terrific job in orchestrating this very popular type of music into the concert hall, into the symphony orchestra. This first slow part comes back in the middle, but with a taint of, as if we were smelling the cigars of Cuba. If you know Buena Vista Social Club and Rubén González, this is the type of thing that Márquez is alluding to. He's really taking this image, this scene, and taking us back to the very slow section, but with a totally different light, under a totally different light. And then the montuno comes back, and it ends in a big fiesta where you hear the first theme and always the clave and the clave and the clave, and it ends up in this explosion that generally not only makes us performers very excited, but the audience as well. So I'm really looking forward to conducting this work with the Orlando Philharmonic. I've already worked with them before, and I know they have the spice and the feeling for this music, and it's going to be so much fun. Just as Márquez is extremely cinematic with his musical expression and vocabulary, this would have never happened without Mahler. In my opinion, Mahler was the first real cinematographer. He didn't have a camera, he only had sounds. But you can hear zooms, you can hear how the takes are from over the countryside, over the land, over the cities, how suddenly you see a little band of Jewish musicians playing, and then you zoom out immediately to another thing, and your eye, in this case your ear, is captured by so many different things at once. I think the contribution that Mahler made into art, of course, as well as Wagner's, was really the beginning of cinema. And you see that reflected in the Márquez with the story I was telling you. But in this case, he narrates a story of a hero, the Titan. And who's the Titan? Who's the hero? Well, first of all, everything that Mahler ever wrote pretty much could be autobiographical. It could also be that the Titan is us, that the Titan is the musicians that can get through this really tough music. The Titan could be the audience who's living this adventure. The Titan is basically anyone who can relate to the music. But he starts with a very specific scene. He starts with 7 octaves of the note A in every range, 7 octaves among the whole orchestra, as if the universe was starting to be heard, and your ear can certainly start to capture the sound, but only a few seconds after the musicians are already actually playing. Then you start hearing the cuckoos and the birds and the forest and distant calls, distant fanfares, distant hunting calls. And this comes back to a story that was told about Mahler, that Mahler, when he was a kid, he was left in the middle of the forest by his father, and his father said, "Oh, please stay here, my son, I will come right back for you." And sat him in the middle of the forest and went and did something, and suddenly forgot he had left his son there. Apparently the wait was actually much longer than the kid thought it would be. So there's this little Mahler sitting in the middle of the forest, hearing the awakening of the leaves, of the animals, or of everything that happens in the forest. And this is exactly the description of the first movement of Mahler's Titan. Then you see this nature start to go into more of an internal fight where the hero appears. The hero starts fighting against all kind of evil forces, of barriers, struggles, and he always, or she in this case, he always gets through these struggles. And this is a beautiful fight, because in the middle of these fighting scenes, you get this extremely intimate love songs, love affairs, that you don't know if they're real, if they're part of a dream, if they're Mahler looking back at his life, if they're Mahler looking forward to his future, or if it's just our own imagination. In the second movement, we get a break from this fight of the hero, and we go into a huge boat out in sea that is rocking from side to side, and this same rocking could be applied to the cheering of and banging of people drinking beer. And tum, pum, 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 pum. And you hear this kind of very simple, joyful bar music, but there's always a taint of irony in everything Mahler does. There's not a single note on Mahler or a single bar in Mahler that is just one idea or one feeling. You will always get the first feeling, the first idea, and then a lot of different shades and layers of feelings, of characters. What could be more cinematic than that? Then, after the second movement, where he takes us for a break in this, and of course puts several songs, popular songs, into the music, which was a totally new thing for the audience of 1888 when it was composed and performed. Then we get to the third movement. So the audience back in the day was already shocked, because they were going expecting a symphony, And this, in theory, it is a symphony because it has 4 movements and it has this sort of form of a symphony, but it actually isn't in many other ways. Mahler was sure that people would love his symphony, but actually everybody hated it. Everybody, including his closest friends, were so absolutely shocked with what they heard. And the 3rd movement had a lot to do with it, I think. So after we hear several songs, popular songs, it's as if today you would take, a Michael Jackson song and put it into a symphony. That's exactly what he did. But then we get to the 3rd movement and he puts Frere Jacke, the song that every kid knows, that everyone knows, and he puts this tune inside. He puts it at the beginning, and instead of putting in major key, which is what we usually hear it on, he puts it in a minor key. So it's already crooked, it's already wrong. Something's about to happen that is wrong. Then he decides to give it to the solo contrabass. And in the highest possible register, in a really difficult place to play, where there's almost very little sound that you can make from this instrument. So he's already making everyone struggle, including the soloist. And then this theme, Frere Jacke, starts repeating and repeating and adding, and all the layers keep adding, and each layer becomes even more grotesque and ironic than the one before. Follows by the tuba. He picks the weirdest instruments to follow the melodic line at the beginning. All this always accompanied by the timpani that just gives this constant procession beat. And it is said that Gustav Mahler had seen this painting kind of engraved in wood that had the picture of a funeral march. And this funeral march was a very particular one, a very Mahlerian one. Why? Because the funeral is all the characters and all the animals from the forest, the squirrels, the rabbits, so on, taking and going into this procession with the corpse of the hunter. The hunter is dead and the animals are taking him to his grave. What could be more ironic than that? So Mahler, in his genius moments, interrupts this with Jewish fanfares and Jewish songs and klezmer ideas, and then fanfares from the distance, and all these sort of things that make it even more crooked, cruel, and evil, absolutely ironic, laughing at itself. So I totally understand why people would leave the hall and be completely appalled, but nowadays, it's still so fresh and so exciting. Of course, there's always moments of love, as there are in almost every movement. And then when we're at the most subtle moment, where probably half of the audience will be asleep, because it just starts fading out, slowly, slowly, slowly repeating, and everybody's quiet, and everybody thinks it's over. Then you hear this humongous blast of sound that just hits you right in the face, and it's a tremendous sound that I think had never been heard before, the loudest you can possibly hear an orchestra play. This was a huge orchestra already. I haven't even said about that, but for that time, he had, so many horns and so many trumpets and so many violins and so many of everything. He had 2 timpani sets. So I heard sometime that Mahler finally went once to the Niagara Falls and stood there and heard the Niagara Falls with all this roar, this natural roar, and this sound that is so potent and huge, and stood there and said, at last, a true fortissimo. This is exactly what I meant by fortissimo. So that's what it is, an outcry, an absolute yelling of humanity. And he writes in his score, from hell to paradise, del inferno al paradiso. And that's exactly what the last movement is about. Is taking the hero and a journey from hell, from struggle to paradise. And there's a lot in between, and I wish I had time to tell you everything about this piece because it's a world on its own. But if you know the rest of the symphonies of Mahler, you'll know that this hero actually not really succeeded, because he triumphs at the end of the symphony, but then the second symphony comes along and starts with the death of this amazing hero. So I look forward to seeing you all at the concert, and thank you so much for inviting me to perform with the Orlando Philharmonic.